Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Misfits, where we celebrate unique paths, unconventional ideas, and those redefining workplace culture. I'm your host, Fyiona Yong, and I'm thrilled to introduce a true pioneer in employee engagement and wellness, Sam Lau. With over 30 years of experience, Sam has dedicated his career to creating innovative solutions that boost employee morale, improve work-life balance, and foster a culture of loyalty in workplaces across Asia. Since moving to Hong Kong in 2010, similar to me, Sam has been the driving force behind Total Loyalty Company, also known as TLC, a leading staff engagement company revolutionizing the way businesses approach employee retention and satisfaction. Through corporate perks, wellness programs, and tailored staff rewards, TLC helps companies of all sizes build healthier, more productive, and engaging workplaces. Join us as we dive into his journey, explore what makes employee engagement so critical in today's fast-paced world, and uncover actionable insights for creating workplaces where everyone can thrive. So let's welcome Sam Lau to the show.
Hi, Fyiona.
Hi, Sam.
How are you? Hi.
Doing great. And it's so fantastic to have you on the podcast. We've gotten to know each other, I believe, in 2018, 2019, where we also discovered that we both were in the oil and gas industry and actually in the same company in Shell.
We were indeed. Amazing. Yeah.
But we missed each other. I think at that time you were in IT, isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah. And I was based in Australia, so spent my Shell career back there. It was a good times, and actually set me on the path of what I was doing, what I'm doing right now, actually. Yeah.
All right. Now, let's kick it off with an icebreaker question. So, if you could start a company with any historical figure, who would it be and how would they contribute to your DEI, your diversity, equity, and inclusion vision?
It's a great question, actually. I was thinking that what would really be an interesting factor. I was thinking somebody in royalty. Is what am I thinking is? I thought something like maybe Queen Elizabeth I or something like that. For a couple of reasons. One is I'm thinking somebody like in the royalty. Well, firstly, you don't have to worry about venture capital, so there's plenty of funding to support your startup. But the second one is, it always intrigues me back in all those years ago, where especially like the British Empire has taken over so much of the world and have such a footprint in everything, and yet. How do we actually recreate, if you like, bring together the DEI message across this whole network now? How would you actually do it now with, for example, thinking back to 100 years ago? I think it'll be quite interesting. It'll be a very interesting debate and a very interesting discussion, but certainly it'll be interesting insights too, in terms of what people were thinking back then. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, you and I, both of us are entrepreneurs, and I never thought that I would become an entrepreneur at this stage of my life. I thought I would be in Shell. We all know that Shell is a great company. And especially my father thought that once I'm in Shell, I'll be retiring with that company, lifelong career over there. But then again, like in this day and age, it's just, there's no more lifelong career. And I never thought that I would actually launch my own business at this stage of my life. And but then I also could see that this is maybe part of my DNA, or something that's influenced also by my family and my ancestors, because both my grandparents actually owned their own businesses. So my grandfather in Penang actually he's a sea merchant. And my other grandparents in KL, they owned a tin mining business. So what were you like as a child? Were there any early signs that you would one day become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely not. So it was absolutely zero science. I think I wanted to be a chemist when I was young. I remember playing with chemistry sets, and that was the thing. It's so no, there was probably nothing there. My parents were, my dad was a government servant. My mum's a piano teacher and a music teacher, and if anything, they would probably wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer, just like a typical Asian family, I think. And yeah, but I was yeah, I spent youth playing around with chemistry sets and wanting to become some mad scientist. I think it's more more the direction I was going for. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
then, was there a moment or an experience in your early career or in your career itself when you realized you wanted to build something on your own rather than climbing up the traditional corporate ladder?
Yeah, it's actually, we talked about, we both work at Shell, and I can't speak highly of that time that's being spent in Shell, and forming myself, being the person that I am, sort of thing. When I was at Shell, and going back to, and I'm really going back to in the early '90s now. The show really has been, sort of like pushing the idea of a happy workplace. Or even back then, like that's before the Googles, before the Facebooks, in show. I remember we had table tennis tables, we had the things like pool tables. I think we had a shop on site. So that was
Yes.
another thing. Those sort of things were always there, and I thought that was really the catalyst of saying it is how important it is to have a happy workplace. So, but on the other hand, I was also finding that when I've started my career in Shell in the IT area, maybe that's not my long term career after a little while. And I think it was really the excitement that I felt, and when I can actually see how people were really happy, when you create a happy event or a happy activity for them, and that sort of really puts me on the path of saying maybe I just need to do what I'm doing, but in a professional sense, and so that was a big leap of faith. And you're mentioning about your parents. My parents were the same. So they were quite conservative, and no real entrepreneurs in that sort of space. But I think there was one moment when I remember when I got my whole business idea sort of all set up, and I was ready to take the leap of faith, to get started. Sort of thing. I really should tell my parents I'm doing this, because, like you said, my parents were the same. They thought I was going to stay at Shell for the rest of my life, and and all that. And my dad actually, the moment that I still remember to this day, when he sort of, went a bit quiet when I told him that I'm going to start a business doing this thing that nobody really understood what I'm actually talking about. And and then he sort of went quiet, and then he sort of said to me, "You know what, Sam? It's great that you're doing. You do this. You have our full support, and if anything happens, we're here to back you." And to have that from my dad, who is, probably I was the person I was the most worried that he was going to say, what do you think you're doing? Like, are you crazy, sort of thing. To have that support without having even sort of like that sort of doubt, or that sort of the lecture, if you like, from him. I think that was really what, in the end, what sort of really got me to go on the right journey. I think that was the thing that got me on the path there, for sure. Yeah.
When was that moment that you decided that this is the right time for you to pivot? Because for me, it was after 14 years being in Shell, was being able to go through different divisions, move to different countries. I started off working in Germany, then I was in the UK and
Yeah.
London, and then in Hong Kong for 7 years for Shell. What actually triggered that for you to decide, okay, this is it. I want to step outside of my corporate comfort zone. I want to build something for myself.
Yeah, I think that was I think that probably the moment of truth was really thinking, this seems like an idea that is too good to be true. I think when I thought about what I wanted to do. So I was so going back maybe a little bit, was in my time in Shell, I was also the president of the Shell Staff Club, and which is really like the social club in Shell back in Australia, in Melbourne. And we created so many interesting things and fun things for people to do, booking tickets to shows and concerts, organizing a ski lodge at Mount Buller, and things like that. And to think that those sort of ideas can really make people feel so proud to work for Shell. I think that's the key thing, is about feeling proud to be an employee of the company, and it was done. And back then we used a subscription model. People pay, I think it was like a dollar a week or $1 a month. I can't remember what it was now, to be in the staff club. And I remember there was a light bulb moment where I thought, hang on a sec, this model could be replicated, and we could be doing this for many companies, and it would actually work. And so I think it was that moment that when it happened, that I realized that it was basically a thing that there should be no stopping. And it was just like, I just had that, I don't know, that sense of confidence to say,
Mm.
yeah, this is not going to fail. Of course, like,
Wow.
no business, no business will ever be like that. But I had that sort of sense. It was saying this is it's a no brainer. It won't fail. And we went on that journey. So it was interesting. Yeah, it was thinking back now. It was actually quite a scary moment. thinking
I
back to it.
know. I can't. I mean, definitely amazed that for you, you had so much confidence. For me, I definitely was quite hesitant,
Yeah,
very intimidated as well,
yeah,
because we had this big shell brand behind us, right? One of the
mm-hmm.
things that I always remember contemplating about going to networking events is that do people actually want to talk to me even though they don't see the Shell logo on my business card anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? Am I
Mm-hmm.
still relevant? Am I still important enough?
Yeah.
Those were the thoughts that I had. And but it's very similar to my experience because for you, you were the president for the social club. For me, I was the president of the women's network, and I've always been involved
Mm-hmm.
in DEI topics, being an internal facilitator also for the cultural appreciation topics.
Right.
So I think we were able to test the waters already in Shell, and we saw that we can make a positive impact, and so we want to bring it out to other organizations
Yeah.
and hopefully to be able to scale that positive impact too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're quite right. And I think whilst making money is important, obviously you start a business to think that you can make money from it. But it's actually believing in the concept of what you do can actually make a difference. I think ultimately that's probably what drove what drove me to continue working in the business, and even through the ups and downs of the business, and even to this day, I'm actually thinking back now. I met a lot of entrepreneurs along the way, as you do. When you go into this world, it's like this little secret world of entrepreneurs.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, you see some people who are just in it for the money. Like
Mm.
they might even swap and change their business model or even what they do every 6 months because they say, oh, this is not making money, so I'll switch
Yeah.
to the next one. But the one to stay true to their course, and yourself, and I guess I'm doing the same thing. It's because you believe in what you're doing. So you believe in what you're doing, and it's actually making an impact, doing something good. Like without sounding like we're trying to change the world or whatever. Just genuinely believing that what you're doing, it's actually going to make a difference to people around you, and the making money part will come as secondary. I think
Absolutely.
that's really the bit that sustains the business rather than just in for the quick buck. Yeah.
I mean, completely agree with you. And our clients can sense that as well. There's
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
there's this authenticity. It's pure, it's genuine. And of course, we
Mm,
want to be compensated for the value that we're adding, no doubt
yeah.
about that.
Mm,
But I'd rather do it in a very genuine and authentic way. So now it's almost just 2 more weeks to go in 2024. Now that we're recording this episode, it's
yeah.
mid of December. And typically people tend to wind down, but for both of us running a business like
Mm,
TLC, it must take up so much of your energy, so much of your time. So let's be very candid, right? How do you approach work life balance or even work life integration when your business is so closely tied to your personal life?
yeah. I think that you're exactly right. I mean, that's probably the biggest challenge for all of us still. But I really don't think nowadays, anyway, especially nowadays, you can split work and life, right? So, and it's a bit of a cliche saying, but if you enjoy what you're doing, then it's not really work, right? So, as such, um, I I still get a buzz when come up, brainstorming. We were had yesterday. We had a brainstorming meeting for a client event, and we started with really a blank sheet of paper with just a couple of ideas of what the client wants, and then we came up with all these really cool ideas and just that energy, and then that sort of like you solve a problem for a client. That's to me that's not really work.
Mm.
That's just positive positive stimulation, I think, in a way, because you actually get a buzz out of it, right? So and you actually so for me it's not actually, to be honest, it's not really that hard work. But to have the split of having the downtime, having to reset, having to recharge, it is important. And when you're running a business, I think you do worry about every little facets of things. Am I going to be able to pay the rent? Am I able to look after the employees? They are, is every bits and pieces working well? Is the client needs being looked after? All that sort of stuff. You do worry about that at all times. I remember back in university days. We always joke about, oh, you can never stop, because you're always worrying about the assignment you have to finish, or the essay you have to do. But then when you go into work, you sort of can, when you don't have as much responsibilities, you can sort of leave the work in the office.
Mm.
6 o'clock in 5 o'clock in Australia, and you can leave the work in the office and go and do your own thing. But I think when you're running your own company, it's back the same. It's constantly on your mind. So it's understanding how you can actually maybe take a breather. It's actually quite important. What I do, there's a couple of things I do. I think you work out when you perform at your best. I think
Mm.
so. For me, I actually get quite clarity of mind quite late at night. So I'm a bit of a night owl. So I like to, after dinner, after you had a rest and all that, just to put in a couple of extra hours there. But it's quite clear, and I found that my productivity level is actually quite high. So you both through a fair bit of work, and things that might have been bugging you all day because you're constantly being interrupted by different people in discussions. Um, you get clarity, and yes, you get things done. So to me, it's understanding when you might perform the best, so you actually take advantage of that. So I'm a terrible morning person, so I won't try and get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go for a run, and then think that this is the right thing to do, because I know that's just not me and it won't work. So then I try to get extra, a little bit more extra sleep in the morning. So the other thing I think is the power of meditation. I think it's I never realized I was meditating, but it was by default I was. And I realized they were. So what I was doing was actually meditating when I realized what meditation was.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's quite important is to have that moment of time where you get some clarity. You just take your time, just chill. You might even just run through maybe what you're going to be doing for the day in your mind. And that moment, that 10-15 minutes where you can just do that and just be focused and just be present, I think really helps me and do that. But if you ask ask my wife, then I definitely need more work-life integration or work-life balance.
I think it's always like who you ask, right? And for
Yeah.
me, I have a 2-year-old, and I would say it's probably the best case scenario in terms of like how I work. I am definitely not, like how people always expect entrepreneurs to hustle 24/7. And I
Yeah.
just personally don't really believe in that. I think it's
Mm,
really about, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's really about working smarter
yeah.
and designing your work in such a way that you're the most productive and the most effective. And I think one thing for me, what I try to do at the beginning of the day is to ask myself, what is one thing that I need to do in order to make my day successful or effective? And instead of having that long to-do list, I just really focus on that one thing. And once
Mm,
that's done,
mm,
I'll
mm,
look at all the other things, all the second priorities. And I think it's making sure, as you already mentioned, knowing your biological clock as well, when you're going to be at your best. I'm the
mm,
other way around. I'm the opposite. I wake up at 6 a.m. and then I can start working. And I love it personally because, with a 2-year-old toddler running around, that's the only time of the day where it's somewhat peaceful and
Mm,
quiet. I
mm,
have a fresh mind, and then I'll do all this stuff that I need to do. And then I tend to him. And then the afternoons, usually I start working. And it works out that way. And I think that everyone needs to find their kind of schedule. And I think also workplaces need to adopt or adapt to that kind of, if they always want to preach about work-life integration or work-life balance, I think this is also to be mindful of everyone's kind of biological clock and when they are going to work at their best instead of forcing everyone to come back to the office, right?
yeah, it's that's the big debate at the moment. I think in all workplaces, it's do you continue a hybrid sort of workplace?
Mm,
Do you have everybody back in the office? How do you support people if they do come back to the office? I think I guess from an owner point of view, from I guess from a CEO point of view, it is good to see the team together because that's when you really, I feel, you get magic. Yeah, that's when magic happens. When
mm,
you have a good, really cool bunch of people, they're getting together, they're interacting, they're tossing ideas around. You can't do that on Zoom, and you can't do that on Teams. Like it's you just get whatever you need to get done on when you're on a virtual call. But if you're, hang around somebody's desk and you're just tossing a couple of ideas around, and then somebody else overhears you something and they throw in a couple of ideas, that's when really true magic happens. So I think there has to be a balance in
mm,
terms of that. But I think from a business development point of view, like the growth of a business, then there has to be a better way that people, I guess, interacting. So ultimately, for what we do, that's what we are, right? We're talking about employee engagement. Engagement is not just on Zoom or on whatever, but it's the face-to-face engagement. And really, why would a group of 10, 100, 1,000 people in a company do better than the other group of 10, 100, 1,000 people? It's about those people and how they interact with each other, how they end up working together strongly and creating the best solution out of that. So I think that's sort of important. How do Google or Facebook, how do their scientists and their technicians create the magic of what they create together? A lot of times really requires them to really be face to face, tossing ideas around, doing that, and you sort of wonder whether you can do that in a totally remote environment. But
right.
yeah,
And
so
here I have this follow-up question because I work a lot with Gen Z. Like my
yeah,
new social media specialist, she's Gen Z. She's not based with me in Penang.
yeah,
We're working remotely with each other, I would say quite effectively. I
yeah.
love her ideas. We're able to bounce off each other. So what about Gen Z though, at your client side, or the companies that you're supporting? What do their Gen Z workforce expect with regards to employee engagement? Is it very different from, let's say, millennials, Gen X, or boomers?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think ultimately, there are different ways of thinking about things in terms of engagement, and people sort of go, yeah, I don't really want to just do the traditional, let's all get together and have a dinner and all that. But I think just the time of doing things is different. So what we see is that typically before, people, in a workforce, people might say, well, I won't leave the office until the boss leaves, that sort of thing, and you just, like almost like glued to the office, and time is not important. The In Gen Z, we see that people value the differentiation between work and play, or work and life, and so there's a time delineation. So if your work is to 6:30, well, that's the time. And
Mm,
like, it's not that they don't want to give you the extra time. It's they feel like, well, that's, I'll give you my pound of flesh for the day. I'm now going to do other things that I want to do. So it's just them being more efficient in terms of the usage of that. So I think as managers of Gen Z, you got to understand that's the way they do things. So we do a lot more engagement activities during the work hours, and actually it becomes something people embrace and get involved in. And the other thing is, I guess, maybe look, what we try to do is not just do the same. all the things. So just trying different things out, workshops, marketplaces, different things. So, but I think what we certainly find is do things during the work hours and get the engagement during the time that, people say, well, that's why my work hours is 9 to 6. So, let's do
Yeah.
things. This is work. So it needs to stay in work. Don't make me go and do an 8 p.m. at night activity or whatever.
Drinking activity or even going out for dinner. All right. Now, your company, TLC, is growing from a small business to now a medium-sized enterprise. What are some of the biggest growing pains that you've encountered?
Yeah, growing pains. I think people is always the biggest issue. Getting the right people. And a little bit of extension of what we just talked about. It's how do you get the right people who create magic together? That's what it is. So I was maybe it's a sign of old age, but you start reminiscing to remember the good old days sort of thing. I was talking to one of my colleagues who've been with me for almost 8 years. Which is amazing and I really think that there's a core group of people who just supported us through thick and thin, which is really important. And we're saying, oh, I remember the good old days when it was like just 4 or 5 of us, and we're like 5 friends, going to work and creating something, and we do create magic, and I use that term. I think growing pains for us is how do we not lose sight of that? We're here to create something that has a wow factor for our client. We're not an IT company of cutting some cutting edge code or coming up with some incredible algorithm to be the next AI. We are really creating very down to earth engagement activities. So what's different between what we do versus what an internal team might do is the wow factor. It's the magic that we do. It's the extra things that we do. And we got to bring that to our client. And I think getting the right people, I found that especially over the last few years when we might have employed people during COVID where you don't even get to see them and really get them to feel them, has been a challenge. And touch wood, we seem to have crossed that hurdle now, and we've got a very good team together. So hopefully it's onto bigger things. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And how do you make sure that everyone feels connected to the mission? If you're growing, you have a larger operation, how do you make sure that everyone still knows that this is the big picture vision and my everyday work, this is how I contribute to that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. In fact, I have to say that we lost sight of that a little bit as we grow to start, and what it means is people might actually not be walking the same path as you are. We're not going on the same direction, and that's quite painful because you tend to we try to have a very friendly workplace here. Nobody shouts at each other. Nobody if you do something wrong, nobody sort of go and start swearing at you or whatever. Nobody does that. But on the other hand, it means that probably it's very easy to lose sight of making sure everybody's on the right track. So one of the things that I realized needs to be done is actually the onboarding of a person needs to be done right. So that is so important. In our case, it's very easy for people, a new employee, to think that we're just an employee. When I say just, we are a event management company. So we're no different to another event agency. We run social events and all that. So in an event agency, but we're not. We use a completely different model. We have it's a year-round subscription model. So unless people understand that on day one and then keep reminding of what we're actually doing, it is very easy then to just take the mindset of what we're not, which is, like an event agency as such. So to understand that, I think the way to do it is you need to constantly remind everybody what you stand for. I think the power of town halls is important. The power of just getting people together and just sharing a vision again, it's also quite important. we just did that ourselves this week. And that was, I felt that was a really important step for us to, especially with this new group of employees together, to actually ensure that we are also thinking on the same path of what we're trying to do. And we'll do this regularly from now on. I think that's important. The second thing is just for people to feel comfortable with each other, not just as colleagues. Because if you're just as colleagues, then the danger is, well, you're just colleagues, right? You're just there to do your work, and it's almost like I hand in my homework every day. You told me to do these 5 tasks, I've done it, and I don't really care whether it's good and bad. As long as I pass, it's okay. To really genuinely have a team of people who care for each other and have each other's backs, I think it's the sort of the key to really make sure this whole thing works. And we need to keep doing that, and to make sure that that's the case. My operations, my head of operations said the other day, it's important to remind people that they are there to represent TLC. Each individual is out there to represent TLC, but it's also important for them to know that there's a whole team behind them to support them to represent TLC. So that you never feel you're not alone in what you're trying to do. You're not trying to solve the world's problems by yourself.
Absolutely.
We have a whole team of people together. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great to hear that you have such camaraderie in the organization. Now, when I first embarked into, I took the leap into entrepreneurship, I also met a lot of other entrepreneurs, successful ones who were able to scale their business, and some of them not so successful. But I always ask them one question. So what is one advice that you would give me with regards to scaling your business? So I would like to ask you that question, Sam. So is there one particular lesson that you've learned, especially when you're now scaling your business, the growing pains that you've just described? What would you share with entrepreneurs so that they could actually learn from your experience?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is find a mentor to support you, because it doesn't matter how old you are or whatever age you're doing on this journey that we're on. It is quite a lonely journey. I have, I'm fortunate. I've got some good shareholders, but they're silent shareholders. They're there to support the business. They believe in the concept, which is fantastic, but they let me go and do what I need to do. And so I find that this journey, it's quite lonely. Firstly, you can convince yourself, because you're only convincing yourself, whether something is right or wrong, or good or bad, or direction is good or bad to go for, and you make mistakes along the way. So but then you can convince yourself also that that mistake was okay, sort of thing, right? So I think having a mentor is just somebody so you can be your genuine sounding board. Not somebody who's directing you, because then that's that's a different thing, but somebody who just basically happy to listen to you, bounce ideas off, help you debate ideas. I think it's very important. And I think if I look back to even my journey in Hong Kong, if I had that earlier on, who knows, it might mean that we might have been moving even quicker ahead, or or maybe even take on a different tack to what we're doing. But I think having that mentor, it's so important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. Your journey from corporate leadership to founding Total Loyalty Company, your insights on employee engagement, and your perspectives on DEI are truly inspiring. And it's clear that your passion for creating healthier and more balanced workplaces has made a lasting impact on so many organizations in Asia. We've touched so much today, from your entrepreneurial journey to the challenges of scaling a business without losing sight of its vision, to also the importance of work-life integration and inclusive workplace strategies. Your experiences definitely offer actionable lessons for listeners who are navigating their own paths in leadership, business growth, and creating more connected teams. And to our listeners, thank you also for tuning in to another episode of the Thriving Misfits podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Thriving Misfits on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube for more inspiring stories. Until the next time, keep thriving, Misfits.